I've been hiking since I was a kid, so being outdoors and exploring trails is nothing new to me. But there's one day, one hike, that still sticks with me years later. It wasn't just a normal walk in the woods. Something about that day felt off, and I don't think I'll ever forget it. It was early summer, the kind of day when the sun warms your face, but the air is still fresh and crisp under the shade of trees. My wife, Sarah, and I decided to take our dog, Maggie, for a hike in a national forest not far from our town. Maggie is a medium-sized mixed breed, full of energy and always happiest when she's out in the woods or by water. This trail was perfect because the first few miles led to a well-known waterfall with a swimming hole, a popular spot that usually had plenty of people around, especially on weekends. We started out mid-morning. The trail was easy at first, wide and mostly flat with packed dirt and small stones underfoot. We could hear the distant roar of the waterfall long before we saw it. Along the way, families and couples passed us, some with kids, some with dogs like Maggie. She was excited, tail wagging, sniffing everything. Sarah and I were relaxed, chatting quietly, enjoying the warm breeze and the soft crunch of our boots on the trail. When we got to the waterfall, it was exactly as expected. Crystal clear water cascading down rocky ledges into a deep pool below. People were swimming, sunbathing on the rocks, and laughing. We let Maggie off the leash for a while so she could splash in the water. She was in her element, running around, chasing sticks, shaking off water and looking totally happy. After a while, we decided to go farther. We'd read about a rougher part of the trail beyond the waterfall that fewer people took. It involved a bit of climbing and some steeper sections that usually kept casual hikers away. Sarah was up for it, and Maggie was still eager, so we packed up and started heading beyond the swimming hole. The path quickly changed. The wide, easy trail narrowed and became rocky and uneven. Trees thickened around us, blocking out much of the sunlight. It felt cooler, more enclosed. The sounds of the waterfall faded behind us. As we climbed, the trail twisted through dense brush and gnarled roots, making it harder to keep a steady pace. Maggie bounded ahead sometimes, but mostly stuck close to us. We walked for another mile or two without seeing another person. The silence grew heavier with every step, broken only by the crunch of leaves and twigs underfoot, the occasional bird call, and Maggie's soft panting. Sarah and I kept our eyes alert, watching for any signs of wildlife or hazards. The forest here wasn't as well maintained, and the trail markers were fewer and farther between. Maggie was still happy, at least at first. She loves being in the woods and could probably walk 30 miles if we let her. But then something changed. We were in a particularly dense part of the trail, where tall firs and oaks crowded the narrow path and thick underbrush tangled around the roots. The air smelled damp and earthy, and shadows pooled beneath the branches. Maggie suddenly stopped dead in her tracks. Her body tensed, and she stared straight ahead, ears perked and eyes locked on something invisible to us. She refused to move forward. At first, I thought she might have smelled an animal or maybe spotted a small snake or something harmless. But then she started whining softly and pulling at her leash, trying to get us to turn back. Her usual excitement was gone, replaced by a fear I'd never seen before. Sarah and I looked at each other, uneasy. We stopped and listened, but the woods were eerily quiet. No rustling leaves, no calls of birds, no distant animal sounds, just stillness. Maggie growled low and kept pulling hard on the leash, desperate to get us moving the other way. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. We were deep in the woods, away from the safety of the crowded waterfall, and now Maggie was scared of something ahead. I thought maybe a bear or coyote was lurking, or even worse, someone dangerous hiding in the trees. The thought was unsettling, but without any proof, all we could do was trust Maggie's instincts. Sarah nodded, and we both agreed silently it was time to turn around. We quickly packed up and started retracing our steps. Maggie tugged eagerly, leading the way back the way we came. The trail seemed different now, less welcoming, more ominous. Every snap of a twig made us jump. The sun dipped lower behind the trees, and the shadows stretched long across the path. On the way back, we kept looking over our shoulders, half expecting to see something following us. But there was nothing. just the empty woods and our own uneasy breaths. When we finally reached the swimming hole, the familiar sounds and sights were a relief. People were still there, chatting and playing. The safety of the crowd washed over us like a warm blanket. We let Maggie run free again, and she immediately perked up, chasing sticks and splashing in the water without a care. That night, as we drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd narrowly escaped something. Maybe it was just a wild animal Maggie sensed, or maybe something more human and dangerous, hiding in the shadows where no one else goes. I'll never know for sure, but one thing is clear. That day reminded me how much we rely on animals' instincts in the wilderness. Maggie saved us by refusing to go forward. If we'd ignored her, if we'd pushed deeper into those dense woods, I don't want to imagine what might have happened. Now, when I go hiking, especially in remote areas, I pay even closer attention to my dog's behavior. I watch the trail carefully, listen for any strange sounds, and stay alert to everything around me. The forest is beautiful and wild, but it can be dangerous too. And sometimes, the most important warning doesn't come from people or signs, but from the silent fear of a dog who knows more than she lets on. I never planned to write this story down, but after all these years, I keep thinking about that hike, about what could have happened, and how close we came to something terrible. It's not the kind of story you want to tell at a party or share with strangers, but it's real, and it still haunts me. It happened back in the late 1970s. I was in my early 20s out on a trip with my friend Mark. We were both into hiking, not experts but experienced enough to take on longer trails. We decided to backpack through a section of forested mountains in Northern California. It was a well-known trail, popular but not crowded, and we picked a weekend when fewer people were expected. The air was fresh and cool when we started. Pines towered over us, their needles rustling in a gentle breeze. The ground was soft with years of fallen leaves and pine needles. Early morning light filtered through the branches, casting patterns on the dirt path. We didn't say much, just moved steadily, focused on the rhythm of the hike. The trail twisted and climbed, leading us deeper into the woods. Streams crossed the path here and there, their water clear and cold. Birds called from the branches above, and somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of a woodpecker echoed. Everything felt peaceful, normal. After a few hours, we reached a clearing on a ridge with a panoramic view. The valley stretched below us, dotted with trees and streams that sparkled in the sunlight. We took a break, unpacked some snacks, and drank water. The mood was light. It was just two friends enjoying the wilderness. That's when I first noticed him. He was sitting on a rock a short distance away, half hidden behind a cluster of bushes. At first, I thought he was another hiker, but something about him was wrong. His clothes were worn and dirty, not the kind of gear hikers usually wore. His face was sunburned and unshaven, his eyes scanning the woods like a predator watching for prey. Mark noticed him too, and we exchanged a glance. We didn't say anything but decided not to stay near the clearing any longer. The guy gave off a strange, unsettling vibe that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. We packed up quickly and took a side trail that wound down through thicker trees. The woods grew darker and quieter. I kept glancing behind us, half expecting to see that man following, but there was nothing. Still, the feeling of being watched lingered. Later, as we set up camp near a small creek, I told Mark what I'd heard in town before our trip. The rumors about a killer who targeted male-female couples hiking and backpacking alone in the area. I'd never paid much attention until now, but thinking back on the man we'd seen, I felt a cold chill. The stories said the killer was a man who preyed on couples, attacking them when they were isolated on the trails. He used the wilderness to hide, striking without warning. The police were searching, but no one had caught him yet. Mark and I were both guys, and I remember thinking that maybe we weren't his usual target. Maybe that's why he hadn't approached us. But that thought didn't make me feel safe. It made me feel lucky. We didn't sleep well that night. Every noise, the snap of a twig, the rustle of leaves, made me jump. We kept our backpacks close, our knives ready. I wondered if the man we'd seen was still out there somewhere, watching, waiting. The next morning, we hurried down the trail, eager to get back to the main road. Our pace was faster, tense. We passed a few other hikers but avoided stopping or making much conversation. The woods didn't feel friendly anymore. A week after we got home, I saw a newspaper report with a picture of the man from the trail. It was the killer. They'd caught him after an attack gone wrong. The details were gruesome, the kind of things that stay with you long after you put the paper down. I still think about that hike, how close we were to danger without even knowing it. How the forest can hide more than just trees and animals. The way people can vanish in the wilderness, and how important it is to stay alert, to respect the risks. Now, when I go hiking, I'm careful. I tell people where I'm going, I hike in groups, and I watch the trail and the people on it. The mountain is beautiful, but it's not always safe. Sometimes the real threat isn't the weather or the animals, it's the people. I've told this story once before, but it's one that's stuck with me all these years. It's about an encounter I had hiking with a friend on Mount Tam in Northern California back in the late 1970s. The kind of memory that settles deep into your skin, that stays with you every time you step into the woods. It's not some made-up tale or spooky campfire ghost story. It's real, and it changed the way I looked at hiking, at people, and at safety. Back then, I was in my early 20s, fresh out of college, eager to escape the city and find some peace in nature. I didn't hike a lot, but a few friends introduced me to the trails on Mount Tam. The mountain itself is a beautiful place. Dense forests of redwoods, rocky ridges with sweeping views of the Bay Area, and quiet streams that feel like the heartbeats of the land. It's easy to forget the city even exists when you're deep in those woods. That day, I was hiking with a friend named Jerry. He was a bit older, more experienced, and he knew the trails better than anyone I'd met. We planned a loop that would take us through some of the quieter parts of the mountain, places that didn't see many hikers. The idea was to get away from the weekend crowds, to find solitude. We started early, the air crisp and cool, the sky a clear blue. The path was soft with fallen needles and leaves. Jerry carried a heavy pack, full of supplies, and I had a small day pack with water and snacks. We moved steadily, talking little, more focused on the rhythm of the hike than anything else. After a few miles, the trail opened onto a rocky outcropping that looked out over a wide valley. The view was stunning. You could see the bay shimmering in the distance, the city buildings tiny and far away. We stopped to catch our breath, to take it all in. That's when we noticed him. He was sitting on a large flat rock a short distance from us. He looked out of place in a way that sent a cold shiver through me even then. He was thin and gaunt, with ragged clothes and wild, tangled hair. His eyes were sunken and dark, and his face was dirty and scarred. But it wasn't just how he looked, it was the way he carried himself. There was something off about him, a tension in his body, a dangerous stillness. Jerry and I exchanged a quick look but didn't say anything. Neither of us wanted to stay near that spot longer than necessary. We didn't want to start a conversation or invite trouble. The mountain was big, and there was no reason to linger. We kept our distance but noticed the man watching us. Not just looking, but studying. Felt invasive and wrong. I remember feeling a tight knot in my stomach, a warning that something wasn't right. The hairs on my arms stood up. We moved on quickly, taking a detour around the rocky area. The trail grew narrower and steeper, winding through thick brush and towering redwoods. Our pace was faster now, urgent but careful. Neither of us spoke about the man, but the silence between us was heavy. Over the next few miles, I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. Every time we stopped to rest, I would glance behind the trees and bushes, half expecting to see that gaunt figure again. But the woods were empty except for us. We made it to a small creek where we refilled our water bottles and took a break. The sound of flowing water was calming, but my mind kept drifting back to that man. I tried to convince myself that he was just another lost hiker or maybe someone struggling with life, but deep down, I knew it was something darker. A few days later, I picked up the local paper and almost dropped it when I saw the face staring back at me on the front page. It was the man from the trail. The headline called him the Trailside Killer, a name the media had given to a person who had been terrorizing hikers and campers in Northern California for years. He had been arrested after a long search, caught trying to flee after a failed attack on a couple camping nearby. The article described his crimes, how he preyed on people out in the wilderness, how he used the remoteness of the trails to his advantage. It was chilling to realize that the man I had seen on Mount Tam was responsible for so much pain and fear. Jerry and I both recognized him instantly. We had seen the danger firsthand and had somehow escaped it. It wasn't until years later, when I was with my girlfriend on a different hike, that I truly understood how close I had come to something worse. Jerry and I had been out there alone, cautious and aware. But if I had been with someone else, someone who wasn't as alert or who trusted strangers too easily, things might have ended differently. The wilderness can be beautiful and serene, but it can also be unforgiving and brutal when you cross paths with the wrong person. Since that day, I've always carried a few extra precautions when I hike. I don't go off the beaten path alone. I tell people where I'm going, and I keep my eyes open. The story of the Trailside killer isn't just a scary memory. It's a reminder of the real dangers that exist even in the most peaceful places. The mountain still calls to me, but now I listen carefully to what it tells me, both the beauty and the warning beneath it. I still remember the way the sun slanted through the trees that morning, the way it made the dew on the leaves look like thousands of tiny glass beads. We had been planning this trip for months, a weekend hike in the backcountry to get away from the noise of the city and whatever stresses we were carrying. It was just me and two friends, Mike and Sam. We loaded our packs the night before, double-checked the gear, and set out early Saturday with the trailhead a few hours' drive from the city. The place was supposed to be remote, but not impossible. The trail was an old fire road winding through dense forest and then up into rocky ridges. The maps showed a few campsites scattered along the way and a small lake at the halfway point. It was the perfect mix of challenge and comfort for a weekend. We started in the cool morning air. The forest was thick with pine and fir, the smell fresh and a little sharp. Birdsong filled the silence between our steps. Mike was the only one carrying a portable speaker, and as we moved, he had the idea to play some music to lighten the mood, a bit of rock to keep us going. We agreed, and soon, the familiar riffs of classic songs filled the air. Somewhere near the second mile, as we crossed a small wooden bridge over a creek, the speaker came alive with the unmistakable opening chords of Free Bird. Mike laughed and cranked it up louder. We fell into step with the music, the strings echoing through the trees like an anthem for the wild. The sound bounced off the trunks and the rocks, and for a while it felt like the forest was part of the song. We joked silently to ourselves, no need for words, about how perfect the moment was. The way the melody stretched and soared as the trail climbed higher. The warmth of the sun hitting our backs, the steady rhythm of our breathing syncing with the beat. There was something freeing about it. We didn't care about the miles or the difficulty. We just walked. Then things started to change. At first, it was subtle. The trail narrowed sharply after a bend, and the forest closed in. The trees grew thicker and older, the underbrush denser. The ground beneath our feet got rocky and uneven. The music from the speaker seemed out of place here, almost intrusive against the quiet that wanted to settle again. We lowered the volume. I noticed the air grew cooler and heavier. The sunlight was filtering less through the canopy, the shadows getting longer even though it wasn't late yet. Our pace slowed. Mike looked around, a little uneasy, but said nothing. Sam was scanning the trees as if trying to find something. An animal, a sign, anything. We passed an old sign, half buried in moss. It was faded, but I could just make out the letters, "No trespassing." That wasn't on the map. We checked it again, but the trail looked like it continued forward. We kept going. Soon the trail vanished. There were no more signs, no clear path, just the dense forest stretching in all directions. The speaker was dead silent now, the battery drained, or maybe Mike had turned it off. I didn't ask. None of us did. We just stood there, staring into the green walls. Then, from somewhere deeper in the trees, I heard a voice, clear and loud, but not close. It called out, "Play Free Bird." It was the same voice, repeated. No shouting, no anger, just a simple, almost pleading command. We all froze. I scanned the area, but there was no one. The trees stood still. The wind was quiet. It was like the voice was coming from the forest itself. The voice repeated, "Play Free Bird." Mike grabbed the speaker, but it was still dead. We tried to ignore it and move, but the voice came again, closer this time, sharper, urgent. "Play Free Bird." We started walking, faster now, trying to find the trail, the road, anything. The voice kept following us, always just behind the line of trees, echoing and urging. It didn't sound angry, but it didn't sound friendly either. It was unsettling, like someone trapped, begging for a song that no one could give. We reached a clearing near a small pond. The water was still, reflecting the gray sky. We sat down, exhausted and confused. The voice was gone. That's when I realized how quiet everything had become. The birds were gone. The wind had stopped. Even the insects were silent. Felt wrong. We rested for a while, then tried to get our bearings. Mike pulled out the GPS. The battery was nearly dead. Sam pulled out the map. The pond wasn't on it. We decided to follow the creek downhill, hoping it would lead to a road or a campsite. We walked carefully, the forest closing in around us. As we moved, the voice returned, fainter, almost drowned by the rushing water, but still clear. "Play Free Bird." The repetition was maddening, pushed us forward, deeper into the unknown. The sun was setting. We needed shelter. We found a fallen tree big enough to block the wind and settled in for the night. I lay there, staring at the stars, listening. No music, no voices, just the forest breathing around us. In the morning, the first thing we did was head back. We traced our steps to the last recognizable point, the old sign, the mossy rocks. The trail wasn't visible, but we moved carefully, marking trees and making noise to keep our spirits up. Hours later, we found the trail again. The sun was high, and the air was warm. The voice was gone. We made it back to the trailhead late afternoon. The parking lot was empty, the forest silent. We never found out who or what had called out those words. No one else was around that weekend. There were no signs of campers or hikers in the area. I don't think any of us will forget the feeling of being followed by a voice asking for a song that was never meant to be played in the middle of nowhere. It started like any other weekend where I just needed to get away. I'd been grinding through a string of 12-hour shifts at the warehouse, the kind of job that makes your knees ache by noon and your neck stiff before you even clock out. Every Friday, I told myself I was going to do something different, get out of town, breathe some cleaner air. Most weekends, I ended up half watching TV in my shitty apartment, eating leftover pasta and dozing off in the recliner. But this one, I actually followed through. A buddy of mine had mentioned a trail system out near this old ghost town about 2 hours east. Nothing supernatural, just a place that dried up when the mine closed and everyone moved on. He said the land around it was public, dotted with old service roads and informal trails. Enough to get you lost if you weren't careful, but good for solitude if you were looking to just hike and clear your head. That was what I wanted. No phone service, no lights, no people, just me and the sound of boots on dirt. I left early Saturday morning, threw my pack in the back of my beat-up Toyota, filled my water bottles, packed a basic overnight kit, tent, sleeping pad, food, first aid. I wasn't planning on going deep enough to get in trouble, but I wasn't going to take chances either. I had a printed map, a compass, and an old GPS with fresh batteries. I've been hiking long enough to know not to get cocky. By the time I hit the trailhead, it was pushing 9:30. It wasn't a formal parking lot, just a wide turnout off a gravel service road. No signs, no kiosks, just a narrow footpath winding its way off into dry brush and scraggly trees. The land was flat at first but dipped and rose in small ridges the deeper you got in. I threw on my pack, locked up the truck, and set off. The first few hours were peaceful, hot, but not unbearable. The sun was up but hadn't reached its peak, and there was a light breeze pushing through the shrubs. I followed a faint trail for a while, barely more than a depression in the grass, until it opened up into this dusty basin ringed by low hills. There were signs of people, old fire pits, bits of charred wood, a rusted can or two, but no one in sight. That was fine with me. I pushed on. I broke for lunch under a bluff, sitting on a flat rock in the shade, drinking water and eating a peanut butter sandwich. The heat was building, and I could feel it in the soles of my feet, the grit working its way into my socks. After I packed up, I pushed up the far side of the basin and followed a dry wash into another stretch of broken land. The map wasn't super detailed, but I was keeping my bearings. The GPS confirmed I was still close to the route I'd planned. Maybe a little off, but not lost. It was mid-afternoon when I found what looked like an old mine access road. Narrow, overgrown, but still walkable. I followed it, figuring it might lead to something interesting. The road curved through the hills for a while, mostly downhill. The land around me got more rugged, steeper cuts in the terrain, jagged outcrops, more brush. I started noticing beer cans and cigarette butts along the edge of the road. At first just one or two, but then more, like someone had been partying out there. Broken glass too, a couple shotgun shells. Eventually, the road opened into this wide, flat clearing, maybe the size of a football field. At the far end, backed up against a rock face, was a low wooden stage. Nothing fancy. Looked handmade, just planks nailed together and propped up on sawhorses. There were a couple of folding chairs, a metal trash barrel that looked scorched from bonfires, and big black speakers stacked in uneven piles. The kind of setup you'd expect to see at a bad backyard concert or high school punk show. There were tangled cords, a mic stand bent at a weird angle, and even a drum set with one of the cymbals missing. It was strange, like someone had tried to set up a venue out there in the middle of nowhere. No people, though.
No tents.
No cars. No coolers or signs of recent life. It looked abandoned, but not ancient. Maybe a few weeks since anyone had been there. I took some pictures with my phone, even though there was no service, just to prove to myself later that I wasn't making it up. I didn't want to camp near it, though. Something about it made me uneasy. It wasn't just the junk or the mess. It was the vibe, like something had happened there, and nobody wanted to talk about it. I kept walking, took a trail leading off the left side of the clearing and found a decent campsite a few hundred yards away tucked into a stand of mesquite. I set up my tent, filtered some water from a tiny seep nearby, and heated up some soup. As the sun dipped behind the hills, the wind picked up a little and brought the sound of creaking wood from the stage. I tried to ignore it, told myself it was just the breeze messing with loose boards. When it got dark, it got dark. No moon, just stars, and they weren't enough to see by. I had my headlamp on and kept it low to save battery. I was just sitting outside my tent, sipping the last of my water, when I heard it. Music. It wasn't loud. Not at first. Just a low, off-key sound carrying through the brush. I thought I was imagining it, but then it got clearer, guitar or bass, something with strings. No rhythm, no melody, just noise, like someone was fumbling around on an instrument they didn't know how to play. I turned off my headlamp and crouched low, listened. The sound was coming from the direction of the clearing with the stage. I didn't move. I didn't want to. Every part of me said to stay down, stay quiet, but I couldn't stop listening. The playing kept going slow, lazy notes, like someone was warming up. Then I heard what sounded like a drum, just one hit, then a pause, then another, soft, like someone tapping it with their hand. That's when I heard a voice, not talking, not singing, just a noise, like someone yelling without words. Not angry, not scared, just loud. Once, then silence again. I stayed in my tent the rest of the night, didn't sleep, just lay there with my knife out and my light in my hand, waiting for footsteps that never came. At first light, I packed up and got ready to head out. I was tired, wired from the adrenaline, but I just wanted to be gone. I decided to take a different route back. Longer, but it would loop around the clearing instead of passing through it. About an hour in, I cut across a ridge that looked down on the spot. I stayed low and looked through the binoculars I kept in my side pocket. The stage was empty, but there was something new. A torn tarp flapping in the breeze, tied up to two trees like a makeshift shelter, and a shape sitting on the edge of the stage, slumped forward, like they were tuning something. I didn't look long. I just kept walking, didn't eat, barely drank. Got back to my truck around 2 o'clock and drove straight home. When I got back, I tried looking up the area. Found a few old Reddit threads, some posts on hiking forums. Most were just people talking about the ghost town, the mines, typical stuff. But then I found one post, old, maybe 5 years back, talking about a dessert band that used to throw shows out in the hills near that spot. DIY punks, crust kids, that kind of thing. People would bring instruments, play all night, get drunk, pass out in the dirt. One comment stuck with me. It said, "This band fucking sucks. Let's get out of here." The person never posted again.
No replies.
No context. I don't know who I heard that night. Maybe it was just some weird guy with a guitar living off-grid. Maybe some squatters found the stage and decided to have some fun. But the way the music came and went, the silence between the notes, the way that voice didn't say anything but still made my chest go tight. I don't go back to that area. I don't even hike alone anymore. Something about that place stuck with me. Not because I saw anything violent. Not because I found bones or blood or some horror movie clue. It was just how wrong it all felt. The trash, the stage, the playing in the dark, a performance with no audience. And whoever was still playing, they weren't trying to entertain anyone. They were just playing because they didn't know how to stop. I was about 24 when I enrolled in archaeological field school. It was part of my graduate program, a required hands-on experience before moving forward in the department. We were going to spend 6 weeks in the mountains, living out of tents, digging during the day, and documenting findings in the evenings. The site was at around 7,500 feet in elevation, on U.S. Forest Service land that doubled as grazing area. The nearest paved road was 10 miles away, winding through dense pine forest, steep ridges, and rocky slopes. There was no cell reception once we passed the last ranger station. Once you were out there, you were really out there. The setup wasn't what you'd call glamorous. There were about 12 of us, all students plus 2 instructors. We each had our own tents scattered along a gentle rise above the dig site. A few hundred feet down from camp, there was a spring-fed creek that served as our only source of water, and we boiled everything before using it. Our meals were a mix of canned food, granola, instant oatmeal, peanut butter, and pasta. There was no refrigeration, so we rotated cooking duties and tried not to waste anything. Nights were cold, colder than I expected for the time of year. Even in summer, up that high, the temperature would drop into the 30s. The days were long and full of repetitive work. Digging, brushing, recording, logging, measuring. There were moments of excitement when someone uncovered something interesting. Maybe a bit of stone tool, a charcoal deposit, or a piece of bone. But for the most part, it was slow and methodical. You had to enjoy the rhythm of it to stick with it. By the 3rd week, we were all used to the routine. Wake up cold and stiff, heat up coffee water, dig and sweat until lunch, break, dig again, eat, then crawl into your tent and pass out from exhaustion. My tent was a 2-man, but I kept it to myself. I had my sleeping bag, a foam pad underneath, and a little gear pile in one corner, clothes, notebooks, headlamp, bear spray, some snacks I tried to ration but always ran out of too soon. Every evening I'd crawl in, zip the fly closed, and try to fall asleep despite the rocks under my back or the wind flapping the rainfly. It was lonely, but a good kind of lonely. Quiet, removed. Out there, you learn to listen to the environment. One night, about halfway through the trip, something woke me up. It was maybe 2 or 3 in the morning. The night was dead silent, colder than usual. My breath fogged in the air. I remember being tucked deep inside the sleeping bag, just my nose and eyes exposed. That's when I heard it, just outside the thin nylon wall of the tent. A low, deliberate huff, then another, closer, wet, heavy, almost like someone breathing through their nose but much larger. I could hear it circle one side, then stop. Then a sound I can only describe as a snort. Not a pig snort, but deeper, throatier. I froze. I didn't move a muscle. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might give me away. The sound of the breathing continued, and I realized whatever it was right outside the tent, just a thin layer of nylon between us. I couldn't tell what it was. There were no footfalls that I could hear, no hoof sounds, no crackling of sticks, just breathing. Then it bumped me, right on the side of the head. Not hard, but solid enough that I could feel the pressure. Something large had pressed against the tent wall, right where my head was. My body tensed like a spring. I didn't think, I just reacted. On pure instinct, I threw an overhead punch straight up through the tent wall. My fist connected with something, definitely not hard like a tree. Felt warm, thick, muscular. There was a startled grunt, a shuffle, and then nothing. Silence. Whatever it was, it left. I stayed perfectly still for at least a full minute. I couldn't hear anything anymore.
No breathing.
No movement. The forest around me had gone back to dead quiet. Even the insects were still. I didn't want to unzip the tent. I didn't want to move at all. I knew I had hit something. Not enough to hurt it, probably, but enough to startle it. If it was a bear, maybe I got lucky. If it was a mountain lion, maybe it hadn't made up its mind before I reacted. Either way, I wasn't about to go see. Eventually, I rolled onto my back and pulled the sleeping bag tighter around me. My hand was trembling. I had a faint ache in my knuckles, but not enough to say I'd punched anything too bony. I stared at the ceiling of the tent, barely able to blink. Every creak of fabric, every gust of wind, every slight brush of branch against nylon kept me wide-eyed. I lay there until the first pale gray hints of morning started to color the sky. When I finally crawled out, the air was sharp and damp. Everything looked normal. There were no tracks that I could see, but the ground was dry and hard-packed. No fresh claw marks.
No scat.
Nothing knocked over. I walked slowly around the tent, looking for any sign. I checked the side where I'd been lying. There was a faint smear of dust and a light dent in the wall of the tent, like something heavy had leaned into it. That was it.
No answers.
I didn't say anything to anyone that morning. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't want to seem paranoid. Maybe I thought they'd laugh and say it was just a cow. Could have been a cow. They did graze through the area sometimes. There were salt licks placed near the tree line and old cattle trails that wound along the ridges. But this didn't feel like a cow. I'd seen plenty of them. They're clumsy, loud. They smell. You always know when they're around. This thing had been quiet, deliberate. After that night, I kept bear spray next to my head every time I went to sleep. I set it so that the safety tab was easy to remove with one finger. I slept a little less, listened a little more. I stopped keeping snacks in my tent, even though we were technically allowed to as long as they were sealed. I moved them to the gear shed we kept near the kitchen area, 50 yards away. I just didn't want to risk it. Over the next couple weeks, there were no more close encounters. A few others mentioned hearing weird sounds at night. Twigs snapping, rustling in the brush, something walking near the edge of camp. But no one reported anything right up against their tent. One morning, we did find what looked like claw marks on a tree about 10 feet off the ground, near where we dumped dishwater. Could have been a black bear, which was common in that region, but nobody saw anything firsthand. The rest of field school passed without major incident. The work was tiring, but good. We found some small but significant artifacts, a few flake tools, a hearth layer that looked promising, even a projectile point that one of the instructors got excited about. We wrapped up the season, packed up camp, and hiked out the same way we came in, down that long dirt track that eventually turned into pavement again. When I got home, back to normal life, showers, beds, phones, soft food. I thought about that night a lot. It came back to me in pieces. The weight of that breathing, the sound of that grunt when I hit it, the total, silent darkness just before and after. I started to wonder what could have happened if I hadn't reacted, or if I had unzipped the tent, or if I'd had food near my head. I did some reading in the weeks that followed, about mountain lion behavior, about bears, even cows, just in case. I learned that mountain lions are almost totally silent, especially when stalking. They can bump tents, curious or confused by the shape inside. I read that sometimes bears will nudge tents too, especially if they smell food or see movement. And yes, cows do wander into camps sometimes, especially at night. They don't see well in the dark. They get confused. But I kept coming back to that breathing, that controlled kind of breathing. Deep, measured, intelligent. I'll never know what it was. That's the part that sticks with me. Whatever bumped me that night, I felt its presence. I don't mean in a spiritual way. I mean physically. I felt it like you feel someone in a dark hallway. Too close, too silent. Something alive. Something that had come in from the forest to investigate the shape under the nylon. Maybe it was just curiosity. Maybe it was something else. But I'm still here, and I didn't open the tent. And I think that's why. I didn't grow up around mountains, and I sure as hell didn't grow up around predators. Where I'm from, the most dangerous thing in the woods is a patch of poison ivy or a deer in the road at night. So when I moved out west and started exploring some of the local hiking trails, I went into it with the kind of naive confidence that only comes from ignorance. I read a few blogs, packed the basic gear, and figured that was enough. That attitude lasted exactly until one hike that I will never forget. It was early fall, a week into September. The heat of summer had finally broken, and the days were cooling off just enough to make long hikes bearable again. I had a 3-day weekend and didn't want to spend it sitting around. So I planned a solo hike on a trail in the national forest about 2 hours from where I lived. It was known for being remote but scenic, thick forest, dramatic views, and not much foot traffic. Just what I was looking for. I packed light but smart, enough water, high-calorie food, emergency supplies, headlamp, basic first aid, a loud whistle, and my small fixed-blade knife. I debated taking my bear spray, but at the time I thought that was overkill. I hadn't seen so much as a chipmunk on my last 3 hikes. I left it in the glove box. I set out early that morning. My plan was to do a long out-and-back trail, about 14 miles total. The first few hours went as expected. The forest was dense but calming. Ponderosa pines, thick underbrush, fallen trees here and there. The air was crisp, and the trail, though a bit rugged, was easy to follow. Felt good to be alone. The rhythm of hiking, the way your mind zones out while your legs do all the work, was something I'd started to really appreciate. Around midday, I found a high point that gave a pretty solid view of the valley below. I stopped there to eat lunch, perched on a sun-warmed rock. A couple granola bars, some jerky, and half a bottle of water. Nothing fancy, but enough to refuel. The air was still, quiet. I didn't hear birds or bugs. No wind. Just the sound of my chewing and the occasional creak of the trees. After eating, I started the hike back. The trail had a bit more elevation change than I remembered, and I found myself sweating more on the return. I was about 5 miles from the trailhead when things changed. It started with this tension. I didn't see or hear anything, but my body picked it up before my brain did. Like how you can walk into a room and know that something's off without knowing why. My chest felt tight. My ears strained for sounds. I slowed down without realizing it. Then I noticed that the woods were too quiet. I don't mean peaceful. I mean the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. No birdsong, no squirrels rustling, nothing. Just dead air and the crunch of my boots. I stopped walking, trying to listen harder. I scanned the trees, the brush, everything around me. My heart was already beating faster. Then I saw it. At first, it just looked like a shadow off to the right of the trail. A shape that didn't quite belong. I squinted, leaning forward slightly. It was crouched low in the brush, maybe 20 yards out. Tan fur, big head, long body. I knew instantly what it was. I didn't need to see the full outline. Mountain lion. It wasn't moving, just watching. Its body was low, head forward, ears locked in my direction. I froze. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, but I knew enough not to. You don't run from predators. You make yourself big. You stand your ground. But in that moment, all the advice I'd ever read felt hollow. It didn't matter what I knew. What mattered was that I was alone, 5 miles from my car, and this thing had already decided I was worth paying attention to. I slowly raised my arms, made noise, tried to look bigger, just like the books say. I backed away step by step, eyes on the cat, trying to keep calm. It didn't move at first, just watched. Then it stood up. That's when the panic hit. Seeing it rise like that, muscles moving under its coat, head level with its shoulders, it wasn't like seeing an animal. It was like seeing something designed purely for killing. The way it moved was too smooth, too quiet, too deliberate. It started walking toward the trail. I turned and started walking, then jogging, then running. I knew I wasn't supposed to. I knew running could trigger the chase response. But it didn't matter anymore. My body had taken over. I was running hard, pushing downhill, branches slapping my face, boots catching on rocks and roots. I didn't know if it was behind me or not. I didn't look. I just ran. After what felt like forever, probably less than 2 minutes, I saw movement up ahead. Something black and fast crossing the trail. For a split second, my brain registered it as another predator. But it wasn't. It was a dog. A black Labrador, lean and muddy, sprinting like it had the devil on its heels. And behind it was another one. Then I heard shouting. Human voices. A group of hikers, maybe 3 or 4, with their dogs off-leash. I ran straight into the group, gasping, eyes wild. One of the dogs barked at me, then took off in the direction I'd come from, tail low. The hikers must have seen something in my face, because they stopped dead. I doubled over, trying to catch my breath, pointing back up the trail, wheezing out broken words. I don't know if they understood, but one of them pulled a dog close by the collar and turned to look behind me. I didn't stick around. I needed to get to my car. I pushed past them, following the trail as fast as I could without tripping. My legs were rubber, my chest burning, but I didn't stop. I made it to the trailhead maybe 15 minutes later, nearly collapsing as I reached my car. My hands shook as I unlocked the door and threw myself into the driver's seat. I didn't see the mountain lion again. I don't know if it chased me or not. I don't know what happened to those hikers or the dogs. I didn't wait to find out. I drove straight home and didn't sleep that night. For weeks after that, I couldn't go into the woods. I tried to go on shorter trails near town, but every time I'd freeze up. Every rustle, every snap of a twig, every moment of silence felt like the start of another encounter. I carried bear spray everywhere. I bought a GPS beacon. I even looked up firearms laws, even though I'd never held a gun in my life. Eventually, I eased back into hiking. Slower trails, more populated areas. But I never felt the same. The confidence I had was gone. I understood something that day, something most people never truly get until they face it. Out there, you are not the top of the food chain. You can carry all the gear you want, read every safety tip, tell yourself you're prepared. But none of it means anything if you round a corner and lock eyes with a predator that sees you as prey. Months later, I read an article online about predator-prey behavior. It talked about how mountain lions will sometimes test humans, follow them quietly, observe, even flank them just to see how they react. Most attacks happen when a person panics, runs, shows weakness. It said that running can trigger the same instinct as a deer bolting, and that's exactly what I did. I also read a quote that stuck with me. You don't have to outrun the mountain lion. You just have to outrun your friend. It was meant as a joke, but it chilled me, because I knew it wasn't entirely wrong. That day on the trail, the dogs ran first. If that lion had wanted something to chase, those dogs might have been the easier targets. And if I'd been hiking with someone else, maybe I would have outrun them. Maybe I wouldn't have made it. That thought still haunts me. The randomness of it. The fact that the only reason I might have made it out was because someone else showed up at just the right moment. And their dogs ran faster than I did. That trail, I've never been back. I never will. Now when I hike, I always let someone know where I'm going. I check every trail report. I pack more than I need. I scan every ridgeline, every bend in the trail. I listen harder. I walk slower. And I always carry the bear spray.